All right, you guys should be good to go. The all lost time is going to be 2.5 hours from right now. So if my math is right, 104, and go for
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right, well, let's begin. We will now hear the case of the estate of Genesis Pachillo versus Peony Estates and Harper Martini. Reminder to everyone with this Zoom format that only the advocates that are speaking at the time or related on that examination or statement should have their cameras on and be unmuted. Everyone else now should have their camera off. If there's any questions on that, feel free to ask me now. But if not, let's begin. So plaintiff, do you have any pretrial matters?
Yes, Your Honor. Before we begin, may we make introductions before the court?
Please.
My name is Taylor Pursley. I'm here with my co-counsel, Caitlin Hunt, as
Good morning.
as well as Zion Miller.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
And we represent the plaintiff in today's case.
Okay. Let's actually, plaintiff, before you begin, let's hear appearances from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. My name is Abigail Franke, and along with my co-counsel, Ms. Lexi O'Rourke.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
And Ethan Warner.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
We will be representing the defendant, Ms. Harper Martini, in today's case.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning. Okay, plaintiff, anything further?
Yes, Your Honor. We invoke Rule 603, the constructive swearing in of all witnesses,
That's noted.
as well as Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of all witnesses.
And for the purposes of the rule, do you have any party representatives today?
No, Your Honor.
In defense, I assume that Ms. Martini will be your party representative?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, perfect.
And Your Honor, as this is a Zoom trial, we just ask if there's any point you can't see or hear us, just let us know. We'll do our best to rectify that situation.
And the same goes the other way around. If you have a problem hearing me or anything goes wrong, please let me know as soon as possible so that I can get in contact with the tournament staff and we can make sure time is not penalized.
And Your Honor, before trial today, we agreed with opposing counsel. If there was any time constraints that were exacerbated by technology issues or something like that, we would show leniency and do our best to rectify that situation as well.
That sounds good to me. Opposing counsel, you've agreed to this?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, perfect. That sounds great to me. Again, this is new to all of us. I think that will help with the fact that the time for each examination statement is being put in the chat. So if you have any discrepancy, try dealing with that with each other at first. If and only if there's then a problem between the two teams, then feel free to reach out to me.
And with that, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Plaintiff, actually, one more thing, counselor, just to have it on the record. I know what the answer is because Ms. Martini is alive and here today, but which charge are you pursuing today?
Battery.
Okay, thank you. And defense, anything further?
Yes, Your Honor. First, we would like to point your attention to the pretrial documents you should have gotten before this case started, which includes the Midland Rules of Evidence, all relevant case law, the stipulations, and special instructions. Can
Yes,
I confirm that you have?
I do, yes.
And at this time, we would like to officially tender those to the bench.
Okay, those will officially be entered. As of right now, I have the Rules of Evidence, case law, and stipulations in front of me. So if there's anything else different that you need, give me a second to find the document, but I do have them.
Yes, Your Honor. Secondly, since this is our first time in your virtual courtroom, would you like us to screen share an exhibit before entering it so everyone can see, or only screen share an exhibit once it's been entered?
Good question. So what I want for this case is I want the sharing of an exhibit to be equivalent of showing the jury. So when you lay the foundation and such, do so by not sharing your screen. Let me know what the exhibit is so I can then pull it up. Again, I have that. And until it is then entered and you ask permission to show the jury, you are allowed to share the screen.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. And lastly, we would like to point your attention to Stipulation 3, which simply states that Exhibits 1 through 10 have been pre-admitted in today's proceedings.
All right. That sounds good. Plaintiff, any further, is that your understanding of the stipulation? Anything further you would like to clarify with it?
Yes, Your Honor, that is our understanding.
Okay, just making sure. Defense, anything further?
No, Your Honor. With that, the defense is ready to proceed.
All right, thank you. Let's begin with opening statements, plaintiff, and then reminder to other judges that we will now be changing to speaker view at this time.
Yes, Your Honor. For my opening, I'll be using pre-admitted Exhibit 1. Ms. Hunt, if you could please bring that up on screen now. May it please the court, opposing counsel, members of the jury. This is Genesis Petrillo. Today, you're going to hear a lot about her. You'll hear that she loved her fiance, Casey Soto. You'll hear that she loved going to Thursday night trivia with her friends. And you'll hear, as you can see in this photo, that she loved eating guacamole. But you'll also hear that Genesis never made it to her wedding day. That's because Genesis died the night before she was supposed to have it. She was poisoned with pesticides just before what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. And you'll hear that that poisoning was no accident. Rather, the evidence will show that that poisoning was intentional. That Genesis's soon-to-be mother-in-law, Harper Martini, the defendant in today's case, intentionally picked her poison, placed it in a bottle of wine, and gave it to Genesis. And as a result, the defendant is liable for battery. And in order to prove that charge of battery to you today, we have to prove 3 elements. First, that Harper Martini put pesticides in a bottle of wine. Second, that when she did so, she intended to cause Genesis harm. Finally, that Genesis did in fact suffer harm as a result of that poisoned wine. Now, each of these 3 elements has to be proved to you today based on what's called a preponderance of the evidence, which simply means that what we say happened, that Harper Martini picked her poison, is more likely than not. All we have to do is tip the scales in your mind just ever so slightly, so that you believe it's just the most incremental amount more likely than not that the defendant committed battery. To meet that burden, we'll call Angel Rodriguez to the stand. Angel Rodriguez was Genesis's best friend and her maid of honor. You'll hear that she was at the wedding rehearsal dinner when Genesis died. You'll hear that she was with her the entire night. It was the one that took Genesis to the hospital and ultimately was the one to tell Casey that Genesis was going to die. You'll also hear from Angel that before taking Genesis to the hospital, Genesis told her that she was afraid for her life, that she was afraid the defendant was going to kill her. After Angel Rodriguez, you'll hear from Dr. Jim Kwan, the attending physician who was in the emergency room the night that Genesis died. You'll hear from Dr. Kwan that the medical facts of Genesis's death are consistent with organophosphate poisoning. Dr. Kwan will also tell you that organophosphate poison likely came from the bottle of wine that Genesis was drinking from. You'll hear more about that bottle of wine from Sam Arnold. Sam Arnold was the chef for the wedding and was at the wedding rehearsal dinner. Specifically, she was with the defendant at the rehearsal dinner. You'll hear that she was in the kitchen with the defendant shortly before that dinner began, And you'll hear that in the kitchen, the defendant had a bottle of wine and a bottle of pesticides. Ms. Arnold will tell you that she asked the defendant what those pesticides were for. And you'll hear that the defendant told her they were to kill pests like Genesis. And that this bottle of wine was going to take care of all of her problems for good. Members of the jury, it's no secret that some in-laws hate who their child is going to marry. But you'll hear in today's case that hate turned poisonous. And that's why at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Ms. Caitlin Hunt, will come before you and remind you that the defendant picked her poison and must be held liable for battery. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense, opening.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed when ready.
Members of the jury, may it please the court. The easy answers are not always the right answers. On June 7th, 2019, Genesis Petrillo and fiance Casey Soto attended their wedding rehearsal at Peony Estates right here in Midlands. This was a momentous occasion. Months of hard work, decorating, and scheduling were finally coming to fruition. For Harper Martini, the mother to Casey and the owner of the estate, this was an equally joyous occasion. Harper Martini, as you will hear today, is a loving mother of one, Casey Soto. Harper was born in Napa Valley, California, and comes from a proud family of winemakers. Harper even took years off from the wine business to raise Casey on her own, despite being a single mother. And yet, as we sit here today, the plaintiff insists that Harper harmed Genesis Petrillo. But folks, while the easy answer might be to cast blame, this will not lead us to the right answers. The unfortunate reality is that after drinking too much alcohol during and after the rehearsal, Genesis became gravely ill and was taken to the hospital for alcohol poisoning. Genesis died shortly afterward. Today's case is not about picking a poison. It is about the untimely death of Miss Petrillo from the overconsumption of alcohol. Today, the plaintiff has brought forward a charge of battery upon the defendant. To find the defendant liable, they must do three things. First, they must prove to you that Harper intentionally mixed pesticides into Genesis's wine. Second, the plaintiff must show that Harper acted with the knowledge that the pesticides would cause harm to Genesis. Third, they must show that because of drinking the wine, Genesis died as a result. These are the elements of today's case. The plaintiff must meet their burden by proving to you that it is more likely than not that these elements are true. If at the end of trial, you find it less likely than not that Harper did what she is accused of, she cannot be held liable. Today, the defense will call three witnesses so that we can disregard easy answers and unearth the right ones. First, we will call the wedding planner, Blair Osborne, to the stand. Miss Osborne is a successful and highly rated wedding planner in the Midlands area. Blair will tell us about the wedding planning process and the dynamics between Harper, Genesis, and Casey. She will also tell us about her experience having to deal with Genesis's drinking habits. Next, the defense will call Dr. Renee Cannon, a toxicology expert and medical consultant. Dr. Cannon will tell us that Dr. Kwan, the doctor who responded to Genesis's alcohol poisoning on June 8th, neglected the right answers for a convenient diagnosis. Dr. Cannon will explain that Genesis was not poisoned by pesticides, but as a result of drinking too much alcohol. Furthermore, Dr. Cannon will tell us that Genesis's symptoms were consistent with alcohol poisoning. Finally, she will tell us that the treatment for pesticide poisoning was ineffective on Genesis, leading to her untimely death. Finally, we will call Harper herself to the stand. Harper will tell us more about her family and her relationship with Genesis. She will tell us that while she was often frustrated with Miss Petrillo, she tried her best to get along with her. Harper will also tell us about the rehearsal dinner and her movements throughout that night. She will tell us that she planned to give Genesis the Cara wine in question as a gift at her wedding. In fact, Harper will tell us that she drank from that Cara to make sure it was tasty. Ladies and gentlemen, today the plaintiff will fail to meet their burden because they looked for the easy answers and missed the right ones. At the end of trial today, my co-counsel, Lexi O'Rourke, will come before you and ask you to do the right thing and find the defendant not liable. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 second before we begin with plaintiff's case in chief, give me a second for me and my co-judge to score real quick.
I'm all set.
Perfect. Let's do that at the end of each time just to make sure we're all good. Okay, plaintiff, do you have any witnesses to call?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Angel Rodriguez to the stand.
Okay, and again, for purposes of Zoom, we will now be switching to speaker view. And yes, okay, opposing counsel, please have your screen on as well for objection purposes. And with that, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please introduce yourselves to the members of the jury.
My name is Angel Rodriguez.
What do you do for a living, Ms. Rodriguez?
I'm a kindergarten teacher at Rapid River Valley.
And why are you here in court today?
I'm here because I knew Genesis Petrillo. She was my best friend, and I was actually supposed to be maid of honor at her wedding.
Let's talk about that wedding. Who was Genesis getting married to?
Genesis was getting married to Casey Soto. We were mutual friends.
And what was their relationship like?
They had a very, very positive relationship. If anyone was meant to be together, it was definitely them. I was over the moon that they were going to get married and I was going to be part of the wedding.
How'd you meet Genesis and Casey?
Well, it was a long day at work and it was finger painting day. So I figured I'd use a drink after work. So I went with my friend Drew to Chuggy's and we met Casey and Genesis. They invited us to go on their trivia team. So we did.
You said that Casey and Genesis were getting married. When was that supposed to be?
It was supposed to be June 8th, 2019.
And how were things going leading up to the wedding?
I mean, it was exciting. My best friends were getting married and I was just excited to be part of it. So it was going relatively well until Harper got involved.
Who's Harper?
Harper is Casey's mom. She was having the wedding at Peony Estates, which was her winery.
So when you say things were good until Harper Martini got involved, what do you mean by that? Were Genesis and Harper getting along?
No, they were fighting over everything. Harper said Maroon 5, and then Genesis would say Coldplay. It was about every single thing. They never were on the same page.
Let's talk about the day right before the wedding. How did that start?
It started off well, and we were looking at our dresses, making sure everything was steamed, flowers were ready, everything was good until the night of the rehearsal dinner.
What happened the night of the rehearsal dinner?
Everything seemed to be on different pages for everyone. Harper and Genesis were fighting constantly, and it was hard to figure out what was going on until I ran into Harper.
What were they fighting about?
They were just fighting about everything, where to have the wedding, what to have at the wedding, and I just didn't really want to get involved.
Did Harper mention anything to Genesis during their fight?
She mentioned that Genesis was a pest.
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. This is not hearsay. Pursuant to Rule 801 D2A, all statements of a party opponent are exempted from the rule of hearsay. As the plaintiff in today's case, our party opponent is Harper Martini. Therefore, this is not hearsay.
Counselor, any response to the 801 D2A grounds? Counselor? Mr. Warner?
My apologies, Your Honor. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Your Honor, this particular statement was a recollection or a memory, which for the purposes of hearsay would be irrelevant to that particular rule.
No. Okay. The objection is going to be overruled and the statement will be admitted. Please continue.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm going to re-ask my question. When Harper and Genesis were fighting, what did Harper say to Genesis?
She said that she should just leave and save the family the headache.
How did Genesis react to that?
She told me to keep away from Harper. I'm afraid that Harper's going to hurt me if I'm not careful. And I had never seen Genesis that serious before.
Objection, hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, can I respond? Yes. Your Honor, this is not hearsay. This is accepted from hearsay. Pursuant to Rule 8033, this is a then existing emotional state. Specifically, the statement by Genesis Petrillo is that she is afraid. That is an emotional state and therefore accepted from the rule against hearsay pursuant to 8033.
Okay, response to 8033.
Your Honor, the only difficulty with that contention is that the statement in question was not made in the present moment. It was made after the particular incident, and so that would not fall under the 8033 exception.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. This doesn't have to be directly concurrent with the statement. That would be a present sense impression or an excited utterance. This is a then existing emotional state because at the time when this statement was made, Genesis was afraid. Therefore, this is accepted from the rule against hearsay pursuant to Rule 8033.
I agree. I believe this falls under the 8033, so I'm going to overrule the objection. The statement is still.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, Ms. Rodriguez, did you ever see Harper again following the statement that Genesis made about being afraid?
Well, I saw her heading to the kitchen.
Was she doing anything on her way to the kitchen?
She was holding a can of pesticides. It was really weird.
Did she say what she was doing with those pesticides?
She said that they were for Genesis, but I guess she must have been joking. Dinner was starting soon, so I figured I'd head there.
At the dinner, were things any calmer between Genesis and Harper?
Yeah, things calmed down a little bit when Harper gave Genesis the bottle of wine.
Did Genesis drink that wine?
She did. Alongside a single glass of champagne, she did drink the wine. In fact, it was the only thing I actually saw her drink besides the glass of champagne.
Do you remember the name of the wine bottle that Harper gave to Genesis?
It was called Cara.
And how much of that Cara wine did you see Genesis drink that night?
I saw her drink several glasses. I was with her the entire time.
And how was Genesis acting following drinking that Cara wine?
She was acting really weird. She was stumbling around. I had to hold her up from the back of her dress. I couldn't keep her up, so I tried to take her back to her room.
And how was she acting on the way back to the room?
She was slurring her words. I mean, I was really scared. I didn't know what to do. Her room was a couple steps away, and it took me half an hour.
When you got back to the room, was Genesis doing any better?
Well, things were starting to get pretty serious. She grabbed me, looked at me, and said, "Call 911."
Did you call 911?
Yeah, I couldn't dial the numbers fast enough. I've seen kids be really sick at school, and I would just take them down to the nurse and everything would be okay, but it wasn't that kind of sick. Genesis was really, really ill.
Did the ambulance arrive after you called 911?
Yeah, they did, and we rushed to the hospital. I sat there for hours and waited, and then they told me that she slipped into a coma.
What did you do after you learned that Genesis had slipped into a coma?
I rushed back and I told Casey because I felt like Casey deserved to know. I wasted too much time. I should have told him sooner, but as soon as we got back, it was too late. He didn't even get to say goodbye to her.
Ms. Rodriguez, what do you mean you were too late?
Genesis had passed away before we got there.
You said that Genesis had slipped into a coma. Did the doctors tell you why?
They said it must be some kind of poisoning. I thought it might be food poisoning, but they said it must have been in the alcohol.
Ms. Rodriguez, how did you find out what may have led to her falling into a coma? Did you read something?
I asked Casey if Casey knew anything about what had happened, if there were any answers. But Casey just showed me a death certificate that was all he knew. And I saw poisoning, alcohol poisoning.
Ms. Hunt, can you please bring up pre-admitted Exhibit 7 onto screen? Is this the death certificate that you saw?
Yes.
Ms. Hunt, if you could highlight the section, describe how the injury occurred. Ms. Rodriguez, if you could read that aloud for me, please.
Patient attended a wedding where patient ingested the organophosphate pesticide isofenbos at a lethal doses along with alcohol. The most likely source of the poisoning is the wine the patient ingested with dinner.
What wine had Genesis been drinking the night she died?
The Cara that Harper gave her. And that's when I realized that Harper had mentioned that she knew that Genesis was poisoned. And I don't know how that happened.
What do you mean Harper said she knew Genesis had been poisoned?
When I saw her, she said, "Oh no, Genesis had been poisoned. We'll have to cancel the wedding." And I have no idea how she knew that. I didn't tell her. I didn't even tell her that Genesis was at the hospital.
To the best of your knowledge, did anyone besides you know that Genesis was in the hospital?
No, just from what Harper said. Harper knew.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you. Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Rodriguez, you testified on direct that you saw Harper with what you thought was a bottle of pesticide, right?
A can of pesticides.
And this was before dinner, correct?
That's correct. It was before the rehearsal dinner.
And it looked like Harper was going into the kitchen. Is that right?
That's correct.
But you never actually saw Harper go into the kitchen with that can of pesticides, did you?
No, sir. I said that she was walking towards the kitchen.
You never heard from anyone else either who saw Harper enter that kitchen, right?
No, I didn't.
Ms. Rodriguez, you had a lot to drink at the rehearsal dinner, didn't you?
I had some drinks, yeah. I was the maid of honor at my best friend's wedding.
Well, Miss Rodriguez, you actually lost track of how many drinks you had, right?
I didn't count, but I knew how my body was feeling. I was monitoring it.
Genesis also had some champagne at the dinner, didn't they?
She did, yeah. She had a single glass.
Now, Ms. Rodriguez, what you neglected to testify to on direct was that after that particular incident, you and Genesis went to the cocktail station, right?
I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Well, Ms. Rodriguez, you and Genesis, after the rehearsal dinner, went to the cocktail station, didn't you?
Yes, but not to drink heavily.
Well, Ms. Rodriguez, according to you, over the course of 45 minutes, Genesis drank several bottles of wine, right?
Yes, but like I said, we both didn't.
Ms. Rodriguez, is it your testimony that Genesis did not drink several bottles of wine?
No, I was saying that I didn't.
And later in the night,
Clear.
Genesis ordered tequila shots, didn't she?
That's correct.
You were also pretty drunk yourself at that time, right?
Yeah, I was a little tipsy.
And when you were ordering tequila shots with Genesis, you were talking to an employee of the state named Drew. Isn't that true?
That's correct.
So you didn't see how many shots Genesis could have had because you weren't watching her, right?
My eyes weren't on her the whole night, no, but I did see what she was drinking for a majority of the night.
But that's a yes to my question, Miss Rodriguez. You couldn't have seen her the entire night, right?
Not the entire night.
Now, eventually you noticed Genesis slumped over in her seat snoring, correct?
Yeah.
And Drew thought that Genesis was just drunk, didn't they?
Yeah, that's what Drew thought, but I knew that something was wrong. I knew that Genesis was really, really sick.
And Miss Rodriguez, once you took Genesis back to her room, they were sweating and vomiting profusely, correct?
Yeah, and that's when she told me to call 911.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Miller, any redirect?
No, Your Honor. I ask that the witness be allowed to step down.
Okay, Ms. Rodriguez, you are excused. Thank you for testimony today. 1 second before I ask for the next.
I'm good on my end.
Perfect. 1 second. Okay, I'm also good. So let's do plaintiff. Any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff calls Dr. Kwan to the stand.
Right. Dr. Kwan, a reminder that you have been previously sworn at this time.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good morning. My name is Dr. Jen Kwan.
And what do you do for a living, doctor?
I am the Chief Emergency Department Physician at River Valley Hospital in Midlands. Although I specialize in toxicology, I am in charge of all the patients who come through the ED doors who exhibit a whole host of injuries and illness symptoms.
And where'd you go to school?
I received my Bachelor of Science degree in biology with a minor in chemistry from Georgia Tech, and then I received my medical degree from UNC Chapel Hill. After that, I went back home to Georgia to complete my residency at Emory's Department of Emergency Medicine, where I also completed a fellowship in medical toxicology. I've been working in hospitals in Midlands ever since.
You mentioned you're the Chief Emergency Department Physician at River Valley Hospital. Were you working on June 8th of 2019?
Yes, I was.
And did you have a patient named Genesis Petrillo?
I did. Genesis Petrillo presented to our department in the very early morning hours of June 8th, 2019.
Do you know why Genesis Petrillo was presented to the department?
I do. Ms. Petrillo presented, she was vomiting, she was having trouble responding to my questions, and she smelled like wine, all of which suggested that she was suffering from alcohol poisoning. So we admitted her, and I had my team conduct a full examination accordingly.
Can you describe what occurs during a full examination?
Of course. In this case, a full examination included taking the patient's vital signs, conducting a full examination of the patient's systems, as well as taking samples of and examining the patient's vomit. Ms. Petrio's exam also included listening to her lungs, as well as a full neurologic exam with pupillary responses.
Is this procedure standard in your field?
Yes, every doctor I know uses it. I've used it in every hospital I've worked at. It's extremely widely used and very reliable.
And did you, doctor, reliably apply this examination to the case of Genesis Petrio?
Yes, I did.
And so could you tell us what, if anything, did that full examination reveal?
While the patient's symptoms originally presented as alcohol poisoning, the examination of the patient suggested that she was not suffering from alcohol poisoning, at which point I ordered a full toxicology screen as well as an additional poisons and toxins analysis.
So what
Objection, Your
specific...
Honor, at this time to Rule 702C, that this testimony is based on reliable principles and methods.
Okay, a response?
Yes, Your Honor, we have laid the foundation for Rule 702C. I asked the doctor if it was standard in her field. She answered that it is. Every doctor she knows uses it. She learned it in medical school, and she reliably applied it in this case. We've met 702C.
Response on those grounds?
Yes, Your Honor. If you look in your case law packet in the middle of page 3, you'll see a ruling, Tarot Readers versus Merle Dow. This ruling states that for a case method to be reliable, it should have a known error rate. It should have been published if it has been tested or peer reviewed. And it is up to the judge to assess if this method has met those criteria based on Tarot Readers versus Merle Dow.
Okay, I have read the case law. Opposing counsel, is that your interpretation of the case law?
No, Your Honor, it is not, if I may respond.
Please.
That case law reads that those factors, while relevant, are not dispositive. Opposing counsel is mischaracterizing tarot readers. It says that the judge can consider those, and while they are relevant, we do not need to meet all of these factors for that testimony to be considered reliable.
I agree. I see this statement right here saying that they're relevant and not necessarily dispositive. So using my discretion, I'm going to say at this point, I believe 702C has been met. Opposing counsel, if you believe that any of these specific factors were at issue in today's case, feel free to bring it up on cross-examination. But I believe 702 has been met at this time. So objection overruled. You may
Yes,
proceed.
Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. So, doctor, what specifically made you think Genesis wasn't suffering from alcohol poisoning?
Well, for starters, Ms. Petrio's pupils were constricted, which is not something that we typically see in cases of alcohol poisoning. Generally, alcohol poisoning causes the pupils to dilate or enlarge in. Ms. Petrio was also exhibiting incontinence. She was wheezing and coughing. She was having some involuntary muscle twitching. She was tearing excessively, and she had a slowed pulse, none of which are signs of alcohol poisoning.
So did you have any idea what could have been causing those symptoms?
I did. Ms. Petrio's symptoms were actually consistent with poisoning by an organophosphate.
Let's break that down. First, doctor, what is an organophosphate?
An organophosphate is a type of poison that's typically used in pesticides and insecticides. Organophosphates inhibit the production of an enzyme in the body called acetylcholinesterase. And when the production of acetylcholinesterase is inhibited, the body overproduces another enzyme called acetylcholine. The buildup of acetylcholine is what causes the nervous system to break down and ultimately fail.
And as a toxicologist, are you familiar with organophosphate poisoning?
Yes, I am. I'm familiar with all types of poisonings by numerous types of poisons and toxins. I learned about organophosphates specifically in medical school and during my fellowship, and I stay up to date on the details of diagnosing poisonings by all types of toxins, including organophosphates.
Could you tell us a little bit more about what organophosphate poisoning presents like?
Well, I've actually brought along a chart today to help explain that a little bit more clearly.
Permission for my co-counsel, Mr. Miller, to screen share this chart that Dr. Kwan has brought along. Opposing counsel has seen this prior to today's trial.
Opposing counsel, any objections?
No, Your Honor.
Then please share the exhibit. Or, I'm sorry, not exhibit, demonstrative aid. Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Kwan, what are we looking at here?
This is a chart that lays out the stages of neurotoxicity. A neurotoxin is any kind of poison or toxin that attacks the body's nervous system, like an organophosphate. This chart's helpful because doctors can often look at the progression of symptoms as well as the symptoms themselves to help clue us into what exactly the patient might be suffering from.
Could you walk us through this chart?
Of course. Neurotoxicity begins in the early stages with digestive symptoms. This is where we see things like vomiting, abdominal cramping, and nausea, often exhibited by other similar symptoms. Then we move into the intermediate stages as the poisoning progresses in severity and the symptoms progress. And that's where we see the excessive sweating, the constricted pupils, and the slow pulse.
What about those last items on the chart?
This is the late stage of neurotoxicity poison, when the nervous system in the body starts to break down due to the low levels of acetylcholinesterase. Here we see central nervous system failure, often exhibited through seizures, involuntary muscle movement, and unconsciousness.
Were Genesis Petrio's symptoms consistent with these?
Yes, they were. Not only were the symptoms themselves consistent with the neurotoxicity symptoms, but the progression of Ms. Petrio's symptoms matched perfectly with the expected progression of symptoms in an organophosphate poisoning case.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Miller, you can stop screen sharing. And Dr. Kwan, based on this, did you test Genesis for pesticide poisoning?
Yes, I asked the lab to run another test, specifically looking for those acetylcholinesterase levels in her body. The progression of Ms. Petrio's symptoms, as well as the symptoms themselves, mainly the constricting of the pupils, which is something directly associated with organophosphate poisoning, is what led me to believe that that's what she could be suffering from.
So what did you do based on this?
Well, although I was still waiting on the toxicology results, based on the progression of Ms. Petrio's symptoms, I believed that I needed to provide intervention quickly in order to stop further symptom progression. So I administered the organophosphate antidote.
Did it work?
Unfortunately, it did not. A few minutes after administering the antidote, Ms. Petrio had a seizure. She slipped into a coma and she did not regain consciousness. I called her death at 9:27 a.m.
Now, Doctor, you mentioned you were waiting on the results from the toxicology report while you were administering that antidote. Did you ever get those results?
Yes, I did. I received those results after the patient died.
What, if anything, did those results tell you?
The toxicology results that I received were able to confirm that Ms. Petrio had in fact suffered from organophosphate pesticide poisoning. The tox report came back positive for organophosphates in the wine that was in her stomach, as well as showing low levels of acetylcholinesterase in her body, which we can use to conclusively diagnose organophosphate poisoning. This led me to believe that Ms.
To Rule 1002, best evidence, these reports are exhibits, and we would ask that they be formally entered before they're discussed any further.
Sorry, what specific exhibit are you referring to? The report or?
Yes, the two toxicology reports. I believe they're labeled exhibits 8 and 9.
Okay, response?
Yes, Your Honor. Pursuant to best evidence, we don't have to enter these exhibits to discuss them. Dr. Kwan is simply delineating her findings from those toxicology reports. If opposing counsel would like, we can enter those exhibits, but it's not necessary for this testimony.
Opposing counsel, so again, make it clear. So you're just saying that because they're talking about this exhibit, that in order for the jury to better get an understanding, they should enter the exhibits?
Yes, Your Honor, especially because they're going into detail. If she just said she ran reports, that would be fine. But because she's discussing the content should be entered onto the record.
Okay.
Your Honor, if I may respond on those grounds.
Please.
I simply asked the doctor what those results revealed to her, and in her opinion, what those results meant in the case of Genesis Petreo. I'm not asking her about specific lines in the report, and I'm not asking about those specific numbers that are contained within that report. Therefore, the rule of best evidence does not apply.
True. However, I believe the witness did go into specifics as what the document did contain. So I'm going to sustain the objection at this time. So if you're going to feel free to talk about it more, please enter the exhibit before proceeding. So sustained.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, Mr. Miller, can you please screen share Exhibit 5? Doctor, can you see that all right?
Yes, I can.
And just for the record, Exhibit 5 has been pre-admitted. Doctor, are those results you were discussing?
They are.
And Doctor, could you finish your answer? What, if anything, did these results reveal to you?
Yes, these results reveal to me that the patient died as the result of ingesting wine that was contaminated with organophosphate pesticides.
Thank you, Doctor. We have nothing further at this time.
All right, thank you. And with that, Cross, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Kwan. First, you initially believed this case to be an alcohol poisoning case, correct?
That's correct.
And Ms. Petrio's speech was slurred when she arrived, correct?
Yes, that's true.
She was nauseous,
Yes,
and she was vomiting,
that's correct.
and she was having trouble walking, correct?
Yes,
And she had been drinking.
she did report that to me, and that was corroborated by the friend that accompanied her to the emergency department. Yes.
So that's what led you to believe that this was an alcohol poisoning case.
Originally, yes.
And you did change that diagnosis.
I did. After my examination of the patient, her symptoms did indicate something other than alcohol poisoning.
And you began to administer an antidote for organophosphate poisoning.
I did, yes.
And once you administered that antidote, Miss Petrillo had a seizure, correct?
That's correct.
And then she fell into a coma,
Yes.
and then she died.
Unfortunately, yes.
And this was after the antidote had been administered.
Yes, ma'am, just a few minutes after it was administered.
And the conclusive way, as you said, that doctors test for organophosphate poisoning is by low acetylcholinesterase levels, correct?
Yes, low acetylcholinesterase is an indicator of organophosphate poisoning, and we can use it to conclusively diagnose organophosphate poisoning.
And you ordered that test on June 8th.
I did.
However, those test results didn't come back to you until June 14th, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So when you administer the antidote, you didn't have what doctors use to conclusively diagnose organophosphate poisoning.
No, ma'am, but based on my expertise and my experience in toxicology, I believe that she was suffering from organophosphate pesticide poisoning, and that was confirmed later.
But you didn't have the acetylcholinesterase levels, correct?
I didn't have those levels, no.
Now, Dr. Kwan, you're on the board of directors for Doctors for Organic Solutions, correct?
That's correct.
And this group advocates against the use of chemical pesticides.
That's correct.
And to make it clear, organophosphates are a chemical pesticide.
They are.
And you believe that chemical pesticides are a scourge to the environment.
Yes, I think they're a poison. Of course, they're terrible for the environment. I think they're terrible for people as well.
And you hope that this case will urge lawmakers to ban this pesticide altogether.
Yes, poisonings by organophosphates are tragic situations, as we see in this case. I don't think they should be used, but that is my personal belief and doesn't have any impact on how I treat my patients.
And you hope that this case will help in that banning?
I believe it could.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked that Dr. Kwan be able to step down.
Dr. Kwan, you are excused. Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just let's take a real quick second before we proceed with the third witness. Mr. Simpson, are you ready to go?
Yep, just finished up.
Perfect. With that, plaintiff, please feel free to call your third witness.
The plaintiff calls Sam Arnold.
Miss Arnold, a reminder that you have been previously sworn at this time. And with that, you may proceed.
Could you please state your name for the record?
Oui, bonjour. My name is Sam Arnold.
What's your current occupation?
I currently work as Rapid River Valley's most prestigious food service provider.
Are you originally from Rapid River Valley, Midlands?
Yes, but I returned to France with my mother after my parents divorced. I just recently returned after my papa fell gravely ill.
Did you stay in Midlands after you learned of your father's illness?
Well, unfortunately, my papa passed away. I was just here to settle the affairs of his estate and prepare for the funeral. But I found out that he had left me some money to open my own restaurant. He had always followed my dreams, so I stayed in Midlands after that.
Did you get to open that restaurant of your own?
Yes, but I think that Midlands, perhaps the world, was simply not prepared for Sam Arnold's breakfast salad cafe. My doors closed 6 months after we opened.
What did you do after your restaurant had to close its doors?
I started a special events catering company here in Midlands. It took a little bit of work. I had to learn to make most things less French. People don't generally like snails in their food, but business has grown over time, and I'm now a proud executive chef.
Well, did you meet the defendant, Harper Martini, in the course of your work?
I like that pun that you did there, course. But yes, I did. Harper and Peony Estates are some of my biggest clients. I cater events there all the time.
What events did you cater?
I guess most importantly for this case, I was set to cater the rehearsal dinner for Genesis and Casey Soto, as well as their wedding, both of which were at Peony.
When did you first get involved with that entire wedding process?
Oh goodness, it was November of 2018. Harper called me and a wedding planner, Blair Osborne, in order to cater the wedding. And I was so excited. I've known Harper and Casey for so long.
Now I'd like to talk about the relationship between the defendant and Genesis. Did the defendant ever tell you how she felt about Genesis?
She seemed to never stop talking about Genesis. It was the first day that I met with her. We were trying to plan a menu, and that never got finished because she couldn't stop talking about how selfish and immature that Genesis was. But that is not all that she said.
Well, what else did she say?
It was that same morning I was about to leave after not getting the menu planned, and she took one of the big metal cooking bowls from the counter of the kitchen, slammed it down on the counter, and she turned around to me. She said, "Anyone but Genesis. Literally anyone."
Well, despite all of this, did the defendant ever try to make amends with Genesis?
Oui, un petit peu, a little bit. At the rehearsal dinner, she presented Genesis with a bottle of wine and gave a really sweet speech in front of the wedding party.
Now I want to talk about that rehearsal dinner. Was this the only wine that was being served at the rehearsal dinner?
No, the bottle that she gave to Genesis was a 2019 Cara. All the other guests were given a 2017 Horizon.
And had you seen that 2019 Cara before the rehearsal dinner?
No, never.
Had you seen the other wines before the rehearsal dinner?
Oui, yes, I'm in the wine cellar at Peony all the time, looking and trying wines to pair with my catering. And I'd seen the 2017 Horizon multiple times. I love that wine, but the 2019 Cara was never on the shelves in the cellar.
So what were you doing the day of the rehearsal dinner?
I arrived at Peony at 11 in the morning, and it was almost like the staff there had never catered a big event. The kitchen was a disaster, and so I spent most of my morning cleaning up after their mess and getting things ready for the dinner. And I was just about to leave and go to the rehearsal space, and then I saw a canister of pesticide sitting on one of the kitchen counters.
Had you seen this particular brand of pesticide anywhere else?
No. I've been talking about Peony for a long time, but I cater events all over Midlands. Peony Estates is the only place I've ever seen use this one. It was called Bug Off.
And did the defendant ever explain to you why you saw this pesticide on the kitchen counter?
Well, I asked her, I said, "Oh mon Dieu, why is there pesticide in the kitchen? The last place that pesticide should be." And she told me that the pesticide was to kill pests like Genesis. And then she said she was just kidding, of course.
And did you give that bottle of wine to Genesis?
Oui, yes, just like she asked me to at the rehearsal dinner.
And what do you know happened to Genesis that next day, which would have been her wedding?
I learned that Genesis was rushed to the hospital and unfortunately passed away.
Well, now I'd like to move back to when you were talking to the defendant about Genesis and that wine she was getting. How did the defendant describe this gift she was getting to Genesis?
I remember she said that she hoped that the wine would be something special and she hoped that it would take care of their problems forever.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Bonjour, Sam. Je parle un peu de français aussi.
Yeah.
Good morning. Now, Miss Arnold, you first met Miss Martini in 2016, correct?
Yes.
And Peony Estates is your largest client, and they make up a large amount of your income. Is that true?
Yes, I catered a big one-year event at Peony Estates, and it grew my business so much, and Harper continued to call me back.
Right, Miss Arnold. So you would say you owe a lot of your success to Peony Estates?
Not as much as I owe my success to my own cooking ability, but my business, yes, I owe quite a bit to Peony.
And you previously worked for Harper Martini, correct?
Yes.
And you have referred to Harper Martini as someone who is friendly. Is that true?
Someone who's friendly most of the time, yes.
And in late November of 2018, you held an event at Peony Estates, correct?
Oui, yes.
And at this event, you saw Miss Martini walking from the vineyard with what looked like a pesticide sprayer. Is that true?
It was a canister of pesticide, yes.
And after that, Miss Martini placed it in a room with a door opening titled Employees Only, correct?
Oui, yes.
But you did not see how this pesticide was used.
No, I stay in the kitchen.
And you don't know what happened to the pesticide after seeing Harper with it. Is that correct?
No, I no, je ne sais pas.
And Miss Arnold, you didn't see Miss Martini place pesticides into any of the wine bottles. Is that true?
It was never in the wine bottles, but it should not have been in the kitchen.
But this includes the 2019 Cara bottle, correct? You did not see her place pesticides into any of them?
I had never seen a bottle of 2019 Cara before ever. I did not see a pesticide in it, no.
That's a yes to my question.
Yes, I never saw a pair put pesticide in the wine.
I'd like to redirect you to discuss, to your knowledge, the relationship between Miss Martini and Miss Petrillo. Are you aware of Miss Martini trying to reconcile her relationship with Miss Petrillo prior to the wedding rehearsal?
No.
And are you aware that Miss Martini actually got lunch with Miss Petrillo to try and reconcile their relationship?
The only thing that I heard from Harper about Genesis was that she did not like her. I do not know about their relationship outside of that.
So that's a no to my question.
No, I did not know that they got lunch.
So therefore, you're not aware that at this lunch, Miss Petrillo told Miss Martini of her and Casey's plan to move to France.
Objection, hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, this is not being offered for the truth of the matter. This is solely being offered so that we can get a better understanding of Miss Arnold's interpretation of the relationship between Miss Petrillo and Miss Martini. This is not, I would not argue that this is hearsay, Your Honor.
Response?
Your Honor, this is absolutely being taken for the truth. As opposing counsel just said, it's being offered to prove their relationship. That can be proven with how was the relationship? What did you observe about the relationship? The exact words do not need to be stated. Therefore, this is hearsay and inadmissible.
Last word. Response?
Your Honor, we're not offering this to prove to offer more information about the relationship. We are more so using this to offer an interpretation of Miss Arnold's understanding of the relationship.
I think you've already established that she wasn't at that meeting. You're now trying to then get statements that are coming from that meeting, which is exactly what the only reason you would be doing that is if you're using them for the truth of the matter asserted. So I'm going to sustain the objection.
Okay. Miss Arnold, one last question for you. Would you say that you have a good understanding of Miss Petrillo and Miss Martini's relationship?
From what I heard from APR, I would say that I know enough.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor. I just ask that the witness be allowed to step down.
Ms. Arnold, you are excused. Thank you for your testimony today. And real quick,
Oui, merci. Bonne journée.
before I ask if there's any other witnesses, 1 second so I can finish scoring. Well, actually, is there any other further witnesses from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so with that, let's take a brief recess. Timekeepers, how are we doing on time? I've been looking at the chat, but in terms of all loss, we're good, right? Timekeepers? Yes, I see one yes.
Your Honor, all loss isn't until 1:04 and it's only 11:35, so we're doing pretty well.
Perfect. All right. So then let's just do 5 minutes just to play it safe. I don't want to take it any longer. So we will be back at, I'm on a different time zone, so 40. Okay. Sounds good. I will
Yes,
see you.
Your Honor.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let's begin. Let's get back ready. So can one person from each team come on and make sure that we are good to go? Okay, I see plaintiff, defense. Both, I mean, I know you're not physically here, but do we believe that everybody is back and ready to go on both sides, at least for the first examination?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe we're all here and prepared.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, perfect. Well then, with that, let's get started. Defense, do you have any witnesses you'd like to call?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Blair Osborne to the stand.
Okay. Ms. Osborne, a reminder that you have been previously sworn at this time. And with that, you may proceed.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Blair Osborne, and I am a private event planner, currently employed as the owner and founder of Bliss by Blair Events. In that role, I plan a variety of events ranging from birthday parties to lucrative benefit galas, and of course, my personal favorite, weddings.
How long have you been a wedding planner?
Since I was a child, really. I mean, I started off arranging tea parties for my stuffed animals, then I graduated to friends and family, and finally I decided to bring my services and talents to the public by opening my own business in 2011.
As a part of your job, have you ever encountered a woman named Harper Martini?
Yes, I know Harper.
What kind of a relationship do you have with Miss Martini?
Harper and I have had a friendly and professional relationship since 2015. Since that day, I've hosted over 80 events at her winery, Peony Estates. Very successful, might I add. Harper and her staff have always been extremely helpful and attentive, and over the years, I've come to develop a friendship with everyone at Peony Estates, but especially Harper. I mean, she's an absolute doll.
So why are you here today, Miss Osborne?
Well, after years of success at Peony Estates, Harper herself hired me to plan a wedding for her child, Casey, and his fiancée, Genesis. In that role, I was responsible for all of the wedding planning from October of 2018 all the way until its tragic end in June of 2019.
As a part of that process, were you able to meet with Casey and Genesis to discuss the wedding?
Not until January of 2019.
Okay, and was that meeting successful?
Well, the first meeting between Casey, Genesis, and I was rather pleasant. Wedding planning can be very hectic, of course, but even so, we managed to get together and lay the foundation for the rehearsal dinner, ceremony, and reception all in one meeting. It seemed like we were really on the same page, which was fabulous.
Were you able to meet with the group again after that?
Well, of course. Wedding planning takes just more than one meeting, you know. We met on several occasions to discuss details such as the menu and floral arrangements to get everyone back on the same page, you know. The room often felt tense, to say the least, but there was one meeting in particular that didn't go very well.
What meeting was that?
Well, we had scheduled a meeting for May 12th, but the day before, Casey and Genesis had attended an event with the rest of the wedding party. When they walked in with Harper the day after to discuss decorations, nobody said a word. I was going on and on about the different floral arrangements we could do. I mean, roses, peonies, carnations. I even threw sunflowers in the mix to see if I could get a reaction. No one said a word. All of a sudden, Harper pulled out her phone and started playing a message that Genesis had left for her. And after that, Casey and Harper walked out without so much as a goodbye or thank you for all of your help.
Would you recognize a copy of that message if it were shown to you today?
Yes, I believe so.
Per stipulation, Your Honor, Exhibit 8 has been pre-admitted, and Ms. Seagroves will now display that for us. And Ms. Osborne, to the best of your knowledge, is that an accurate copy of that message you heard?
Yes, it is.
And what did you hear on this message?
Well, it was a bit difficult to make out, I'll admit. Genesis was stumbling over her words and yelling and screaming and going on and on. But the gist of it, from what I could make out, was that she planned on taking Casey to France and moving away and seeing Harper as little as possible for the rest of her life.
Did anything else stand out to you about this particular message?
It was just awful. I mean, listening to her going on and screaming and ranting, it was terrible, I'm sure, for Harper, but even to be a witness there.
How would you describe Genesis's condition? Were they upset? Were they coherent?
She certainly seemed angry. She was stumbling over her words, quite incoherent most of the time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Seagrove. You can now stop sharing that particular exhibit. Ms. Osborne, to the best of your knowledge, were there other outbursts at future meetings with the three of them?
Absolutely not. I know wedding planning is stressful for everyone, but I made it clear that I would not tolerate another outburst at one of our meetings.
And were your preparations able to keep the rehearsal on track?
Yes, everything was right on schedule for the rehearsal dinner. The wedding's eye plan run like a well-oiled machine, and despite the fiasco at the beginning, I was determined that this one would be no exception.
Now, did anything happen during the toasts at the rehearsal dinner?
Harper gave quite a lovely toast. Despite expressing a few of her frustrations at the rehearsal dinner, she stuck to our original plan. You see, prior to the party, we had decided it would be best to carve out time for her to say a few words and give bottles of wine to the entire wedding party. She even reserved a special bottle of wine for Genesis. It was really moving, the whole moment. I even teared up a little bit, and I've been doing this for years.
Now, let me go back for just a moment. Do you know what happened to that bottle of wine that Harper gave to Genesis?
Well, I saw Genesis open the bottle and pour a few glasses, but after that I got carried away because an oaf of a cater waiter dropped a tray and half of our appetizers ended up on the floor.
When was the last time you saw Genesis that night?
Right before I left to go home. She was at the cocktail station.
And about what time did you see Genesis at that cocktail station?
About midnight. Most of the guests had already returned to their rooms, but the party raged on.
When you saw Genesis at the drinking station, how did she seem to you?
She was quite loud, stumbling around. I assumed she was trying to dance. I thought she appeared to be drunk, and from what I saw, I thought she'd have a bad hangover in the morning. I took that as my cue to leave and start preparations for the next day.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. If there's any point you can't see or hear me, just let me know, and I'll do my best to rectify that situation.
Thank you.
So you got involved with the wedding process in October, like you testified on direct.
Yes, that's correct.
However, this would soon prove to be one of the worst professional experiences of your life.
Yes, it was a logistical nightmare.
And this was for several reasons, in fact, but one of those reasons is because something made you uncomfortable.
Well, originally, Casey and Genesis were surprised by the fact that I would be planning their wedding.
Well, we'll get to that. The defendant had hired you without informing Casey and Genesis.
From what I understand, yes.
And like you testified, you were hired in October.
I was.
But you didn't actually meet with the couple until January of 2019.
Yeah.
And this process as a whole, the defendant had a solution to make you less uncomfortable.
Yes, she did.
She offered you a 15% higher rate.
She did.
And in total, this totaled out to be $22,280,000.
Objection as to the relevance of this, Your Honor.
Okay, response?
Your Honor, this goes to the bias of this witness. This witness is testifying on behalf of the defense and has been paid by the defendant. This is always relevant in a trial. Therefore, this is a relevant testimony.
So I believe I agree that character bias is always relevant at this trial. So, Mr. Werner, how is this not relevant? Do you believe that this does not go to that, or?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe counsel is offering this particular testimony to go to the battery charge and not the credibility. And this particular testimony does not make any fact in the case more or less likely. If counsel would specify that it goes to credibility, then that would fall within the rule. But in the way that she framed it, it seems to me that it's going toward the battery charge and not credibility.
I seem to disagree. I think that at least the way that I took it, it's going just to talk about the witness credibility. So at this point, I'm going to overrule the objection, and you may proceed.
Well, in total, you were offered $22,280.
With the family and friends discount I gave her, yes.
And this is a 15% higher rate.
Yes.
And you were offered this to stay discreet.
Initially, yes.
So you were offered this to withhold the truth from the couple until months later.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, now I'd like to talk about the day of the rehearsal dinner. You saw the defendant present a bottle of wine to Genesis.
I did.
And the defendant had some word for Genesis when she presented this bottle of wine.
Indeed.
The defendant said, "I got this just for you."
Yes.
She said, "Don't open it in front of anyone else."
Correct.
She said, "I want this bottle to be just for you when you have a private moment to reflect on everything that you have done."
She did. It was a beautiful moment.
You saw the defendant give this bottle to Genesis.
That's correct.
You saw Genesis take a drink out of this bottle.
I saw her pour 2 glasses. After that, I was distracted.
Well, did you indeed saw Genesis pour glasses and drink from this bottle?
Yes.
And then you're aware that Genesis later passed from poisoning.
Yes.
But the defendant said something a month and a half before the rehearsal dinner.
Could you clarify?
Well, the defendant said, "One of these days, Genesis will drink the wrong thing and it will kill her."
Yes, she did say that in a moment of frustration.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I'd just be asked that my witness be allowed to step down.
Okay. Ms. Osborne, you are excused. Thank you for your testimony today. And 1 second before we begin with the second examination.
I'm good on my end.
Okay, 1 second. I'm still doing. Okay, I'm all good to go. So defense, do you have any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Dr. Renee Cannon to the stand.
Dr. Cannon, reminder that you have been previously sworn at this time. And with that, you may proceed with direct examination.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good morning. My name is Renee Cannon.
What do you do for a living, Dr. Cannon?
I'm a medical consultant for Gardner Consulting, Inc.
Explain what a medical consultant does.
As a medical consultant, my job consists of reviewing the work of other doctors. It's similar to a second opinion or a case study. I'm looking at their work to make sure that they haven't taken any easy answers and to make sure that every step they've taken has been accurate to ensure the best care of the patient. This is relevant to malpractice suits.
Where did you go to school?
I attended the Ohio State University, where I graduated with my Bachelor of Science in Chemistry in 1990, and I graduated from Harvard in 1996 with my medical degree with a specialty in toxicology.
Describe your experience in toxicology.
After graduating from Harvard, I worked for Massachusetts General Hospital for 9 years, and following my time there, I worked as a professor at Midlands Medical School for another 9 years before moving on to my current position at Gardner Consulting, where I've worked for the last 6 years.
How do you approach a case like this as a consultant?
So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to collect all of the materials that are relevant and can be provided by the other doctor. This includes affidavits, the previous doctor's reports, and anything run by the hospital. I'm also then going to read this over very carefully to ensure that all the steps they've been taken have been accurate and that no easy assumptions have been made, and then apply this to my medical knowledge.
Is this method reliable?
Yes, it is the gold standard in my field and is what I was taught to do during my time at Harvard.
And did you reliably apply this method to today's case?
I applied this method carefully and reliably as I was taught to do and as I taught my students to do during my time as a professor.
What materials do you typically review in a case like this?
So for a case like this, what I'm typically going to be reviewing are going to be the certified death certificate, any reports run by the attending physician at the hospital, in addition to any affidavits that I'm provided with.
And what materials did you review in regards to today's case?
In today's case, I reviewed the affidavit of Angel Rodriguez. I also reviewed Dr. Kwan's certified death certificate, the unknown poison analysis and toxicology reports run by River Valley Hospital, in addition to Dr. Kwan's report and an alcohol impairment chart.
Were these materials sufficient?
These materials were more than sufficient.
Now, looking at Dr. Kwan's report, what causes of death of Ms. Petrillo did he consider?
Dr. Kwan considered that Ms. Petrillo had passed due to respiratory arrest caused by alcohol poisoning at first before changing the diagnosis to organophosphate poisoning.
Were these the only causes of death that should have been considered?
No. Dr. Kwan should have also considered another cause of death and did not adequately consider one possible cause of death.
Which cause of death did she fail to adequately consider?
Dr. Kwan failed to adequately consider alcohol poisoning.
Explain the symptoms of alcohol poisoning.
There's many symptoms of alcohol poisoning. Some of the big ones that we're going to see are nausea, vomiting, the inability to walk and stand, as well as incontinence or the inability to control defecation and urination.
Which of these symptoms did Ms. Petrillo have?
Ms. Petrillo exhibited all of these symptoms and several others.
What else did you notice?
I also noticed that in the report from Dr. Kwan, Ms. Petrillo's blood alcohol concentration, or BAC, was 0.16. However, this wasn't taken until 2 hours after emergency services were called.
Now, explain how BAC works.
So, contrary to popular opinion, BAC doesn't stop increasing the moment you stop drinking. Typically, about 30 minutes to an hour will pass before all of that alcohol has been absorbed into your system and your body starts to process that. Once that 30 minutes to an hour have been passed, we're going to start to see a decrease in that BAC, and this is the period that we were looking at for Ms. Petrillo.
Were Ms. Petrillo's symptoms on the night of June 7th consistent with a BAC of 0.16%?
Many of them were, however, several symptoms that she exhibited were consistent with a higher BAC.
Which symptoms were those?
Ms. Petrillo's loss of consciousness and incontinence are consistent with a BAC of 0.3.
So what did you conclude about alcohol poisoning as a possible cause of death?
I concluded that it is possible that Ms. Petrillo's respiratory arrest was caused by alcohol poisoning because the BAC was not taken until 2 hours after emergency services were called. It is impossible to know exactly what her peak BAC was without an exact count of her drinks, which we do not have.
Now, what other cause of death did you consider, Dr. Cannon?
I also considered that Miss Petrillo had a previously unknown allergy.
Was Miss Petrillo diagnosed with any allergies?
She had not been.
Does this mean that she had any allergies?
We can't say for certain. Our knowledge of allergies is changing all of the time, and we're constantly gaining more knowledge about allergies and autoimmune responses, which is what an allergy is. Miss Petrillo also could have developed this allergy later in life or may have never been exposed to this compound before.
Why did you consider this cause of death?
I considered allergies because we don't know as much about them. They can lead to respiratory arrest, and there's no record that Miss Petrillo had ever been tested for allergies.
Was Miss Petrillo tested for allergies at River Valley Hospital on the night of June 7th, 2019?
Nothing in the paperwork that I received from River Valley Hospital would indicate this. We test allergies through either a blood test, which is the safest way to test for allergies because it can be controlled in a lab. However, they can also be tested with skin prick tests or general avoidance. However, these can lead to harm to the patient because they're not being controlled in a lab.
So explain what you concluded about allergies.
I concluded that it is possible that Miss Petrillo may have had a previously unknown allergy that caused her respiratory arrest.
Now, explain the treatment for organophosphate poisoning.
Organophosphate poisoning is treated with the injection of an antidote.
Was Miss Petrillo given an antidote?
She was. And almost immediately after she was given that antidote, she had a seizure and shortly after that fell into a coma before passing away.
So would we be able to conclude definitely that organophosphate poisoning caused Miss Petrillo's death?
It is impossible to definitively conclude that Miss Petrillo's respiratory arrest was caused by organophosphate poisoning.
Now, Dr. Cannon, what did you conclude about Miss Petrillo's cause of death overall?
I concluded that Miss Petrillo most likely died from respiratory arrest. However, it is impossible to determine exactly what caused this respiratory arrest. There are too many unknown factors in this case.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon. No further questions, Your Honor, at this time.
Okay, thank you. Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
All right. Now, Dr. Cannon, I want to start by talking about your possibility of alcohol poisoning being the cause of Ms. Petrillo's death, all right? Okay. Dr.
Yes.
Cannon, can you? Okay. Now, Dr. Cannon, you would agree with me that a blood alcohol content level, or BAC level, of 0.3 is the absolute minimum required to cause death by alcohol poisoning, correct?
That is correct.
In all your work, in all your research, you've never seen a death associated with alcohol poisoning caused by a BAC of less than that number.
I have not.
Like you said on direct, you're aware that Ms. Petrillo's BAC at the time tested was 0.16.
Yes, 2 hours after emergency services were called.
A 0.16 BAC on its own is virtually impossible to lead to death.
Yes, that is correct.
Now, you also said you believe that it's possible it was higher early in the evening.
That is also correct.
But you would agree with me that there is no scientific evidence that would indicate it was ever at 0.3 or above.
No, because we don't have anyone that kept specific track of Miss Petrillo's drinks that night, and her BAC was not tested until 2 hours after emergency services were called, we have no way of knowing exactly what that peak BAC is going to be.
Beyond knowing exactly, which you agreed is impossible on direct, you would agree with me that there is no scientific evidence to believe that it was ever at 0.3 or above, correct?
That is correct. No tests were run to indicate that.
You would also agree with me that based on all the information you reviewed, there is no scientific basis to believe that it even approached a level of 0.3, correct?
That is correct. There's no tests that would indicate such.
What you would agree with me is that it is extremely unlikely that it was alcohol poisoning that killed her and not pesticides.
That is correct.
Now, I want to move on to that second cause of death you talked about, allergies. With an allergy, you would expect some kind of inflammation or rash to appear on the patient, correct?
Sort of. That's the most likely thing that's going to happen. That will not happen in all instances of an allergic reaction.
But it is most likely.
That is correct. It is most likely.
You saw no evidence that Ms. Petrillo ever had a rash or irritation on her skin.
There was no such evidence in the reports I was provided.
So that's yes to my question. You saw no such evidence of that.
Yes, I had received no evidence that that would be the case.
In fact, you saw no evidence whatsoever that an allergy may have caused Ms. Petrillo's death.
That is also correct.
Now, I want to talk about what you did find to be most likely.
Okay.
That was most likely respiratory arrest that killed Ms. Petrillo.
That is correct.
You found that the facts of this case are consistent with organophosphate poisoning.
For the most part, yes.
You would agree with me that there's some overlap between the symptoms of alcohol poisoning and pesticide poisoning.
That is correct.
But alcohol poisoning cannot explain the pesticides that were found in Ms. Petrillo's blood.
It cannot.
Organophosphate poisoning can explain pesticides being found in Ms. Petrillo's blood.
It can.
As a result, you would agree with me that it's most likely that organophosphate poisoning is responsible for Ms. Petrillo's respiratory arrest.
It is most likely. However, we do live in an empirical world, and just because an answer is most likely doesn't mean we can make the conclusion with medical certainty.
Not asking for medical certainty, doctor. I'm asking for medical likely. And you can empirically say that it is most likely organophosphate poisoning that led to the respiratory arrest that killed Ms. Petrillo.
I can say it is most likely.
Finally, you can agree with me that it's most likely those pesticides that led to the poisoning came from the wine bottle that Genesis was drinking that night.
That is the case. There was based on the wine found in Petrillo's stomach and the bottle that was tested. However, there's no way of knowing when that bottle came in contact with the if it came in contact with the pesticides.
But you would agree with me that it's most likely the pesticides were in that bottle of wine.
Yes, again, it is most likely. However, I cannot make the conclusion with medical certainty.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have nothing further at this time.
Great, thank you. Any redirect from this witness?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness be allowed to virtually step down.
Dr. Cannon, you are excused. Thank you for your testimony today. And 1 second before we begin with the next.
Thank you.
I'm good to go on this end.
Perfect. All right. Defense, any further witnesses?
I apologize. Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. The defense would like to call Hopper Martini to the stand.
Ms. Martini, a reminder that you have been previously sworn at this time. And with that, you may proceed.
Good afternoon. Please state your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Harper Martini.
And Ms. Martini, what do you do for a living?
I own Peony Wine Estates here in Midlands.
And how did you get involved in the winery business?
So winemaking has always been in my blood. I quite literally grew up in Napa Valley and was constantly surrounded by winemaking. I eventually moved to Midlands, where I went to Midlands State University, where I double majored in business and horticulture. But I've always known I wanted to own my own winery since I was a little girl. And so Peony Estates was created in 2015.
And Ms. Martini, as the owner of Peony Estates, what are your specific responsibilities of the winery?
So I'm more on the business side of things, like running the bed and breakfast, hosting the tours, and our various event venues. I've also hired Austin Lewis, who is the person ultimately in charge of the actual winemaking.
Tell us about your family.
So I have my son, Casey, who is just the light of my life. I've always been a little protective over him because my husband sadly passed away after I gave birth to Casey.
Miss Martini, did you know Genesis Petrillo?
Yes, I did.
Tell the jury about your relationship with Miss Petrillo.
Well, I knew Genesis when she met Casey in graduate school. And, from the beginning, I was never really a fan of her. However, I soon found out that her and Casey were actually engaged.
What do you mean when you say you were never a fan of Genesis?
Well, from day one, I could clearly see how she was just not a good influence on Casey. She was just disrespectful, and honestly, I was heartbroken when they got engaged. I just knew that they weren't a good match.
Did you ever try to form a better relationship with your son's fiance?
Yes, many, many times. I tried to bury the hatchet again and again, but I just felt as though Genesis wasn't really interested. We finally sat down to get lunch one day, and that is when I found out that Casey and Genesis were planning on moving to France. From that moment on, I knew I needed to be civil with Genesis, but that wasn't the only thing I did.
What, if anything, Miss Martini, did you do in an attempt to reconcile your relationship with Genesis?
So on the night of the rehearsal dinner, I presented Genesis with a brand new bottle of our 2019 wine, Cara. In the weeks leading up to it, I had even tasted it myself, so I knew it was perfect and that she'd love it. I was just doing this so we could have a better relationship for our new family.
Miss Martini, you mentioned the night of the rehearsal dinner. I'd like to talk about that night a little bit more. When was the rehearsal dinner?
It was June 7th, 2019.
And how did the night start?
Honestly, it started off pretty well. The guests seemed to be enjoying themselves. We had a great dinner, and, there were some pretty lovely speeches. However, the night did kind of go downhill once I saw Genesis.
Why did the night go downhill?
Well, for starters, she showed up late. And, every time I did see her during the night, she had another drink in her hand. She was stumbling and she seemed pretty drunk to me. Look, I know that we were at a winery and people were drinking, but I don't know. I just thought that she was kind of taking it too far.
Did you stay for the whole party?
No, I did not. I ended up going to bed at around 10 p.m. However, I was woken up at 2 a.m. from a phone call from one of the bridesmaids.
And what did you learn on that phone call?
So I learned that Genesis had been taken to the hospital. And so I immediately got up and I went to the room where she was staying. And that is when I found the empty bottle of wine, the Cara wine that I gave her, on the floor. It was completely empty. I don't know. I was just so frustrated.
Why were you frustrated, Miss Martini?
Well, like I said, I gave her this bottle of wine so it could be a turning point for us and our new family. I'd spent so much time making it, and just to see it on the floor, empty, so soon after I gave it to her too. I don't know. I was just disappointed. I would have thought that she would, appreciate it as much as I did.
What did you do after seeing this empty bottle of wine?
I tore off the label and I threw the bottle in the trash.
Miss Martini, I want to talk about what you did, if anything, after learning that Genesis went to the hospital. Where did you go after learning of Genesis Petrillo's hospitalization?
I went back to bed.
Why didn't you go to the hospital?
Well, I assumed she had alcohol poisoning. When thinking back to the party, every time I saw her, she had another drink in her hand and she was stumbling, and I thought she was really drunk. That's why I didn't go. I just thought she had alcohol poisoning.
Miss Martini, You've heard the allegations that you poisoned Genesis Petrillo. Did you poison Genesis Petrillo?
No, of course not. Although I disliked her, I would never do such a thing. As a mother, all I have ever wanted is for Casey to be happy. And if that happiness included Genesis, I was going to be supportive of my son.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross, you may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Martini.
Good morning.
You, of course, love your child, Casey, very much.
Yeah, he's the light of my life and, the only really family I have left.
Exactly. And Casey's only real flaw to you, well, that was Genesis, right?
Yeah, I definitely didn't approve of her. I thought she was kind of a wild child and not a good influence for him.
You didn't see in Genesis what Casey saw.
No, I did not. As a protective mother, I didn't see her that way.
Your only wish for Casey was for him to take over your business one day, true?
Yes, I really wanted him to take over when I retired. I mean, he would be working with me every day, and honestly, I loved seeing him around.
But you thought if Genesis stuck around, well, that couldn't happen.
Yeah, Genesis hated the winery. Whenever she was here, she would go to my clients and tell them how awful it was.
So, ma'am, you started your plan, true?
My plan?
You presented Genesis with a note.
Yes, I did.
You would recognize that note if I showed it to you today?
Yes, I would.
At this time, per your instructions, Your Honor, if Your Honor and defense counsel could pull up Exhibit 24, the plaintiff is now offering that into evidence.
Okay. Response? All right. I'm sorry. Wait, has this already been? Okay. Sorry. Clarification. You are now entering the exhibit at this time, correct?
Yes, Your Honor. We're offering it into evidence at this time.
Sorry. Was confused with what's pre-admitted and what's not. Opposing counsel.
I completely understand.
Any objections to this exhibit, Your Honor? Or opposing counsel?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Exhibit 24, I believe, is entered.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Martini, this is the same note you gave Genesis, true?
Yes, it is.
This note reads, leave Casey and the enclosed $300,000 is yours. True?
Yeah, honestly, I was pretty desperate at that point.
This note reads, otherwise, I will take you out of the picture the hard way.
Yeah, I needed to convince Casey to leave her.
This note reads, you have till the 7th.
Yes, it does read that.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. You can stop screen sharing. Ms. Martini, this plan, it didn't work, did it?
No, she, threw the note in the trash and kept the money.
So on June 7th, after that happened, she kept that money, she threw that note away. You went down to your wine cellar.
Yeah, I figured the only option left was my peace plan, for us, our new family.
You retrieved that special bottle of Cara you'd been saving just for Genesis.
Yeah, it was our brand new bottle, first ever made. I wanted it to be a luxury bottle where she would love, and it would kind of be a turning point.
You brought it up to the kitchen.
I did, where I gave it to Sam Arnold.
And Genesis was presented with that bottle later that night.
Yes, she was.
Ma'am, you know that bottle later tested positive for organophosphate pesticides.
I do know that now, yes.
Those are the exact pesticides you use at your winery.
Yes, they are the pesticides that we use. We specifically use the brand Bug Off because we have a lot of pests.
And as the owner, you certainly have access to those pesticides.
Well, yes, of course, but if you're insinuating I would poison Genesis, you would be very wrong with that.
Ma'am, it's a simple yes, you have access to those pesticides.
Yes, like I said.
All right, now I'd like to talk about something you mentioned on direct examination. You said you received a phone call from a bridesmaid around 2:30 a.m. Did I get that right?
Yes, ma'am.
You said that in that phone call, the bridesmaid told you that Genesis was in the hospital.
Yes, and then I immediately went up and went to her room.
Ma'am, that's not true, is it?
What do you mean by that?
Ma'am, you recall being deposed.
I'm sorry, can you repeat? I didn't hear you.
You recall being deposed for the trial.
Yes, of course.
You would recognize a copy of your deposition if I showed it to you today.
Yes.
Mr. Miller, could you now screen share the defendant's deposition? Ma'am, you recognize this deposition as your own, true? These are your answers?
Oh, yes, yes.
All right. I'd like you to read along silently as I read aloud, starting with lines 331. Answer: I left the rehearsal dinner partly shortly afterwards. I do not know what happened after about 10:30 p.m. At around 2:30 a.m. on June 8, 2019, I received a panicked phone call from one of my employees, Austin Lewis, I believe, that the employee heard someone had been rushed from Peony Estates to the hospital. I asked the employee who the person was, but the employee wasn't sure. I suspected Genesis. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did. I must have gotten
Thank you, Mr. Miller. You can take that down. So, ma'am, I'd like to talk about what you knew about those pesticides at your winery on June 7th, the day of that rehearsal dinner. You knew that only a sip or two of your wine contaminated with those pesticides could be fatal. True?
Yes.
You knew that if pesticides were mixed in with a glass of wine, you couldn't see it.
Yes, that would be correct.
You knew you couldn't smell it.
Yes, that is also true.
You couldn't tell those pesticides were there at all.
To my knowledge, I don't believe someone could.
And June 7th, on that day of that rehearsal dinner, well, that's the day you gave Genesis to decide. True?
Yes, to leave him.
June 7th, that was the day you presented Genesis with that bottle of wine.
Yeah, after I saw she wasn't leaving, I decided to put a peace plan into place for our new family.
So that's a yes, June 7th, that was the day you presented Genesis with that wine.
Yes, on the night of the rehearsal dinner.
You know, just hours later, Genesis died.
Yes, I know that now.
Nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I just asked my witness to be allowed to step down.
Ms. Martini, you are excused. Thank you for your testimony today. Defense, any further witnesses they will be calling today?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. With that, then, let's do let's see, we're at 23. We have plenty of time, right? Timekeepers, are we good to go? I just want to make it clear.
Yes, Your Honor, we have over half an hour until we hit a loss.
Perfect. So let's see. Both of my closers, can you please unmute or show your screen real quick? I'll talk to both of you. Okay, Ms. Hunt, and then who's my other closer? All right, well, okay, here we go.
Apologize, it's me, Your Honor.
No problem. Okay, so both of you, are you okay with 5 minutes, or would you like we have the ability to do a little bit longer. I'm gonna give it up to both of you. What are we thinking?
I can do either, Your Honor. Whatever's best for you.
Same with me, Your Honor.
Let's try to get y'all out of here a little bit early. So let's just stick it to 5 minutes. So right now I have 24, so I will be back 5 minutes from now, 29. See you soon.
All right, thank you.
All right. Closers, are we back?
Yes, Your Honor.
I see plaintiff. There's defense. Perfect. Okay. As a reminder, before we begin, just for my co-judge, that we will now be going to speaker view. And with that, Ms. Hunt, closing argument.
Yes, Your Honor. Counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. This was Genesis Petraeus. This was a beautiful young woman, excited to travel the world with her new spouse, Casey. But the defendant didn't see in Genesis what Casey saw. She told you that herself. That's because what she saw was a problem, something to get rid of. And how does the defendant get rid of her problems? Testify. On June 8th, 2019, the defendant picked her poison. First, she tried bribery. You heard that she tried to offer Genesis $300,000 to leave. And when that didn't work, she turned to her second and final poison. This time, the fatal poison of pesticides. She poisoned that bottle of Cara, presented it to Genesis later that night, and Genesis died just hours later. But we couldn't just tell you that's what happened. We had to prove it. We, the plaintiff, had to prove 3 elements by a preponderance of the evidence. And all that means is that it's just a little bit more likely than not. So in a few moments, when you go back to deliberate, if you find that what we've presented you is just a little bit more likely than not that that's what happened, then we've done our job. And we have. First, we've proven that an act was committed, that the defendant poisoned that bottle of wine. The second, we've proven the act intended to cause harm, that by poisoning that bottle of wine, the defendant wanted Genesis out of the picture. And third, we've proven the act did cause harm, that Genesis is no longer with us because she drank that poisoned bottle of wine. And to prove these elements, we presented you with 2 eyewitnesses and with a doctor. And together through the testimony of Angel Rodriguez and Sam Arnold, we know the defendant was alone in her kitchen on the day of the rehearsal dinner with a bottle of wine and a bottle of pesticides, telling anyone who would listen, this is going to solve all of my problems forever. This is for Genesis. But why? Why would the defendant poison that bottle of wine? Well, that leads us to our second element, intent. It was in this note the defendant offered Genesis $300,000. It was in this note the defendant told her, you take the money or I take you out. It was in this note Genesis was given a deadline of June 7th, the day of that rehearsal dinner. Ladies and gentlemen, June 7th came. Genesis was still here. You heard from the defendant herself, she was still here, but she took the money anyway. The defendant followed through on that promise. And how do we know the defendant followed through? Well, you heard from 2 experts in today's case, both of which agreed the most likely cause of Genesis Petraeus' death was organophosphate poisoning, pesticide poisoning ingested through a bottle of wine. But despite the fact that we've met our burden, in a few moments, defense counsel, they're going to stand before you as well. And they're going to tell you a different story. I suspect they're going to try to tell you that, well, maybe it was alcohol poisoning. But members of the jury, don't be fooled. I think back to the testimony of Angel Rodriguez, how the defendant knew even before being told Genesis had been poisoned. Think back to what the defendant tried to tell you today on the stand, that she was told it was Genesis, but we found out together that's not what happened. I think back to that threatening note, that deadline of June 7th. Think back to the fact that both experts agree about the most likely cause of death. Because after defense counsel gives their closing remarks, I'll come before you again. I'll ask that you find the only verdict the facts in this case prove. I'll ask that you find the defendant liable for battery. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 second, actually.
My video.
Defense, or before we begin, sorry, Mr. Simpson, I'm sorry, I forgot to check with you before we have started. Are you all good to go? I apologize.
No, I'm here, so not a problem.
Sorry, I apologize. That's 100% on me. So, but good to hear it. So with that, Mr. Rourke, you may begin when ready. Closing arguments.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. The easiest answer is not always the right one. On the night of June 7th, 2019, Miss Martini attended the wedding rehearsal dinner for her son, Casey Soto, and his fiancée, Genesis Petrillo. The night of this dinner, Miss Martini graciously gifted Miss Petrillo a bottle of Cara wine. Miss Martini had spent time perfecting this bottle, making it special for Miss Petrillo, offering it to her as a peace offering, a fresh start for their emerging family. The night was a momentous occasion, an evening full of laughing and talking and lots of alcohol. Specifically, Miss Petrillo consumed a lot of alcohol that night. More so, the bottle of Cara wine gifted to her in less than 2 hours. That same night, Miss Petrillo was sent to the hospital, and while initially diagnosed with alcohol poisoning, she was later diagnosed with pesticide poisoning. Miss Martini was shocked by Miss Petrillo's hospitalization, unaware of it until 2 a.m. when she received a call from Austin Lewis. Peony Estates has been known to use pesticides in the past. However, since dealing with health code violations, Peony Estates has maintained a proper and clean environment based on its safety precautions and policies. Harper Martini did not harm Genesis Petrillo and did not commit battery. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here today to discuss the plaintiff's accusations against Harper Martini and her company, Peony Estates. Ms. Martini is being charged with battery, and by definition, a battery is an intentional tort, as opposed to an act resulting from negligence. For a torturous battery to occur, the requisite intent is merely to touch or make contact without consent. Non-consensual touching is all that is required. For example, a defendant who intentionally introduces an injurious substance into the plaintiff's food or drink has committed battery, even though the plaintiff voluntarily consumed the food or drink. The plaintiff had to meet their burden today by a preponderance of evidence. And specifically, they had to prove to you the following 3 things. First, they had to prove to you that Harper Martini intentionally mixed pesticides into that wine. Secondly, when Harper put those pesticides in the wine, it was her intent to cause harm. And third, when Genesis drank that wine, she died as a result of the pesticides. Let's discuss how the plaintiff failed to meet their burden. They had to prove to you, the jury, that Harper harmed Genesis, and as a result, she died of pesticide poisoning. But you heard Dr. Renee Cannon tell you that Dr. Jimmy Kwan failed to consider alcohol poisoning as a possible cause of Miss Petrillo's death. You heard Dr. Renee Cannon tell you that Miss Petrillo exhibited symptoms of alcohol poisoning that could potentially lead to death. You also heard Dr. Renee Cannon tell you that there is not one conclusive answer that can explain the passing of Miss Petrillo. You also heard Blair Osborne, someone who worked closely with Miss Martini, say that Genesis seemed to be intoxicated at the rehearsal dinner, pouring glass after glass after glass. You also heard Miss Osborne testify to the character of Miss Martini, describing her as one of the kindest people she has ever met, someone that would never intentionally poison her son's fiancé. And lastly, you heard from Miss Martini herself that she actively tried to reconcile her relationship with Miss Petrillo, giving her a bottle of luxury wine to suggest a fresh start for their relationship and for their emerging family. You also heard Miss Martini voice that when she found out Miss Petrillo had been taken to the hospital, she immediately went to her room and found the empty bottle of Cara on her floor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we will be the first to admit that there was not a good relationship between Miss Martini and Miss Petrillo. We also recognize that Miss Martini did not always say the nicest things about Miss Petrillo. But this does not mean that the plaintiff proved to you that Miss Martini committed battery against Miss Petrillo. When did we hear from someone who saw Harper Martini put those pesticides in a bottle of wine? We did not. When did we hear Harper explicitly say that she was going to poison Genesis? We did not. When did we hear from a single person in this virtual courtroom today who proved to you that Harper intended to harm Genesis? We did not. We did not hear it because it did not happen. And it did not happen because the plaintiff offered you the evidence to come to the easiest conclusion. The plaintiff wanted to use the evidence to charge Harper Martini in the easiest way possible, by painting her as the criminal. The plaintiff has jumped to numerous conclusions and purposefully showed you evidence to fit their narrative. But their narrative is not in line with the facts of the case, nor what actually happened. The plaintiff in this case has only shown the evidence to provide you with the easiest answer as to explain Ms. Petrio's passing. But the easiest answer is not always the right one. We ask you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, to consider the facts of the case and to find Harper Martini and Peony Estates not liable for battery. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hunt, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Members of the jury, I know this doesn't look like a typical courtroom, but we are still here today for a trial. So I want to make something very clear. This is not a murder trial. This is not a criminal case. That means all we, the plaintiff, had to do was prove by a simple preponderance that it's just a little bit more likely than not that what we've presented you today is what happened. And that's exactly what we did. But just like I told you was going to happen, defense counsel stood before you and they tried to tell you that it was alcohol poisoning. Members of the jury, they want to talk about what's easy. Alcohol poisoning would have been the easiest explanation. But Dr. Kwan did more tests. She investigated further and she found that it was organophosphate poisoning that was the most likely cause of Genesis's death. Now, I'm not sure if opposing counsel was listening while their expert, Dr. Cannon, testified, but I was. And what I heard Dr. Cannon say was something very different. On cross-examination, Dr. Cannon said alcohol poisoning was not likely, period. What she did state was likely. What both experts agree was most likely is that Genesis Petrio died as the result of organophosphate poisoning ingested through a bottle of wine. But that's just the first in a string of evidence defense counsel is asking you to ignore to make their story plausible. Because not only are they asking you to discredit their own experts, they're asking you to disregard the statements of their own clients. You see, on the stand today, Harper Martini tried to say it was a bridesmaid who called her at 2:30 a.m. That she knew that Genesis was in the hospital, but that's not true. She knew someone was in the hospital. She suspected Genesis. Why would she suspect Genesis? Well, that's the same reason she told Angel Rodriguez that she thought Genesis had been poisoned. Members of the jury, it's not hard to come to your own conclusion here about why she knew what happened that day. Members of the jury, the defendant said today herself, when Genesis took that money, she had one option left. She went to that wine cellar. She retrieved that bottle of wine. She presented it to her later that night. She knows that bottle tested positive for organophosphate poisoning. And she knows why Genesis ended up with organophosphate poisoning in that ER that night. What the defense is trying to tell you, the story they're trying to tell you, it doesn't make sense. And that's because it's just that. It's a story. What we have presented you with today, those are facts. We've proven that an act was committed, that the act intended to cause harm, and that the act did cause harm. Genesis Petrio is no longer with us because of the actions of Harper Martini. You must find her liable for battery. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Good job, everybody. At this point, when filling out our ballots, can every single person that competed in this round turn their cameras on real quick? just so that we can see that while we have the do finished ballots. And Mr. Simpson, if there's anything else that you need, feel free to speak, or and then just let me know when your ballot is submitted.
Yes. Can someone tell me how to move this to gallery view?
It's going to be your top right button, like in the top right corner.
And it's only letting me move it to full screen. Real quick, can I just ask the following people to just say something so the computer will pop over to their face real quick? The witness who played Osborne, could you say something real quick?
I believe you're on mute, Osborne, Miss Osborne.
That's me. Apologies, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Renee Cannon.
Hello, how are you?
Thank you. Dr. Jen Kwan.
Hi.
Thank you. And the opener for defense.
Hello.
Okay. And finally, the mid for the plaintiff.
Hello.
And excuse me, also the mid for the defense as well.
Hello.
One more time, mid for the defense, please.
Hello. Did you get it?
There we go. Thank you. Okay, excellent.
Okay, my ballot is submitted, so just let me know whenever yours is, Mr. Simpson. And then I believe we have to reach out to, I'll contact whoever we need to contact. Sorry guys, just give us a second here.
Okay, it looks like my ballot's submitted as well.
Awesome. Do you know if it's who were supposed to let Scott or Gunner know? Do you know?
Let me check the email real quick.
I think they just said it in tab.
Oh,
Actually,
maybe they did.
I believe it was Gunner. I'm gonna text him.
Okay.
Courtroom 7. Okay. Sorry, guys. I've notified him. And so at this point, we can't, I don't want to hear schools or anything yet because I want to make sure that they are fully, everything's good to go. But good job, everybody. We'll do some brief notes, but let's do some introductions first. You heard me talk a lot. So let's hear from Mr. Simpson first. Tell us where you're from, introduction.
Yeah, so I'm going to turn on my video for this. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Simpson. I competed 4 years in mock trial and undergraduate at Hillsdale College up in the southern tip of Michigan, basically. And I'm currently down in Arizona, so had to get up real early for this, but it was definitely worth it. So that's my experience at the moment. I did not go to law school immediately after undergraduate, so I've had a little bit of time off in that regard. So if I apologize if some of my questions might be sophomoric or might entirely miss the case problem, bear with my notes in that regard.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Heard a lot from me today. My name is Christopher Royce. I'm currently a 2L at Baylor Law School. I'm up in Texas. I competed for 4 years as well with Baylor's undergrad team. I also serve as an unofficial assistant coach kind of this year. You asked them, I guess, how it's going to be. But overall, really good job with this round. I thought y'all did really well with this problem. I've only seen it a few times, but I really enjoyed it. So let's do, I just want to stay brief because, like I said, we finished early, but I do want to get you all out of here. I know you have a later round today. Ms. Simpson, you want to start first with basic?
Sure, I can do that. I'm assuming for everyone, this is either your first tournament or second tournament since it's relatively early in the year. So obviously I'm not going to comment if there were any slips of phrasing or anything like that. Yes, it makes you more human, but obviously by regionals and orcs, those will have hopefully been all smoothed out and not be an issue anymore. I will say that in the 4 years I competed, I defended a man who was accused of age discrimination and then confessed to other discrimination as well. A chimpanzee handler who admitted to not putting a harness and collar on his chimpanzee, and I'm going to be frank, this is the worst defendant I've ever seen. That napkin note was absolutely brutal. I have pages and pages of notes. What I am going to say is just a couple of points for today's competition so you guys can improve. Be sure and look at if you have windows in the background around you that are open. A couple of you guys had your blinds open. It was really hard to see your face as a result. It didn't affect the scoring or anything, but it might influence other judges in that regard. I'd encourage you to just close your blinds. I believe the defense opener, actually, I'm assuming that's a fake background, right, that you have behind you?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I was about to say that's a very, very impressive hotel setting that you are staying in for this tournament. So that makes a lot more sense in that regard. I do have one point of very great praise that I saw during the tournament and then one critique for everyone. The first critique is obviously watch objections across the board. Some of them were not actually that necessary. I hate relevance objections. They're always overruled. Try and think of something more entertaining for me, the judge, especially as the scoring judge. Hearsay objections are great, but again, make sure that they're not something to like your party representative, because that's always going to get overruled and you're just wasting the court's time at that point. But the one person I will call out is the prosecutor who crossed the defense expert. In all my 4 years, that was the best cross I have ever seen, okay? I kept going, oh, end it here. This is the perfect cutoff point. She's agreed to everything you're saying. She has just admitted that your whole claim is right. And you kept going further and just kept building, and it was wonderful. So I encourage you guys to work towards that, have those build-up moments, and when they arrive, know when to stop. And he ended at the perfect point. So not to call anyone out in that regard, but that is just one example. And I have pages and pages of notes that you guys can look at later.
Thank you. So yeah, same thing. I submitted the individual comments, so you feel free to read those with specific things. I'm just going to give general comments. So first and foremost, I think so. I did a lot of roles, witnesses, and attorney, but one of my big thing was opening. So both of my openers, I thought you both did solid, but I want a bigger ending. I think both of your openings, I want, why should I care about this case? Put that at the end, get a little bit passionate. You're a storyteller, right? You don't get as much passion as the closers. But I always like the last 30 seconds, last 15 seconds, getting me as a jury prepped for what am I supposed to, why do I care about this round, right? So I think I wanted a little bit more of that for both of you. Second's gonna be speed, just across the board. I don't know if it's a Zoom thing or not, and this is you're hearing from me who speaks way too fast, and that was my biggest note all 4 years, speaking too fast. But I think with Zoom, you need to even take into consideration even more. There's just, even with like when you make fast movements, right? Like it's delayed. So just be careful on the speed. A couple of you did a solid job, but I'd say across the board, I just wish it was slower for most of the time. Exhibits. Okay. So this case, it's weird because, right, there's 10 pre-admitted exhibits, and there's some that are not. So here's the way that you handle this. I know sometimes it's easier just to go through with it, just to we get it's admitted, but you need to still lay the foundation for that specific witness and how they know it. So ask the foundational questions still, because there's judges that they don't care if it's pre-admitted. They're not going to let you talk about it until you set those foundational questions. I've had cases like that in the past. So yes, it's nice that they're pre-admitted, but pretty much the only thing that should change for you is not saying that it's admitted or going through that process of showing opposing counsel, right? Ask the foundational questions to the witness still, give a proper introduction of it. Additionally, this is just like a stylistic thing. I like the use of you showing to the jury, but I've seen in a couple rounds so far that people would like zoom in on like specific statements that people were talking about or highlight those. I think one exhibit did. That's something that you all might consider in the future, because I'm like that voicemail. I couldn't read it, like, and then y'all were talking about different statements. I was lost, confused the whole time. So just something y'all might want to consider in the future. Additionally, make sure just listen to like what I said about the exhibits, because remember, treating the exhibits in this case was as if it was showing to the jury. So remember, offer it before, after I enter it, then you can show it to the jury. So just make sure to listen to the beginning for that. Overall, I thought it was good. Defense, quick question. Opener specifically, did you say that part of your theory was going to be that Harper drank the wine herself?
Yes, I did.
Did that come out in trial?
I believed it did. Yeah.
In my direct.
It did. Okay. Well, then I need that to be a bigger point, because I didn't catch it. I literally only wrote I typed most of my notes, but 3 things, like I said, to listen out for. And that was one of the things, and I didn't catch that. If that's true, that is a very big deal. So that needs to be drawn out even more, in my opinion. Plaintiff, I thought y'all did a very good job just as a whole. Each direct was phenomenal for what it was. So the emotional storytelling witness, the expert direct, the character direct, all were solid. But I felt that and this is just hard for overall, it's mock trial. I feel like they didn't necessarily always go with one another, if that makes sense. I wanted more connection from first direct, second direct to third direct. That's hard, obviously, because you have different elements to prove. So if each witness is to prove a certain element, make that clear in the opening, okay? So that I know that. And I think your closer really put it together, but I didn't know that until the very end. So just note for that for plaintiff. Defense, I think opposite of that, I think I knew what each witness was trying to do, but I didn't know what y'all's main theory was. Specifically, the expert talked a lot about alcohol poisoning and then talked about allergies all of a sudden, when alcohol poisoning was your theory the whole time. So just tell me, also opener, same thing, tell me what elements you're contending. Are you contending all of them? Are you only contending the intent, right? You need to make that clear earlier on, I think, because law is confusing. When you tell jury elements, you make it easier for them, but go a step further. Tell them what exactly you're gonna do. So plaintiff, tell what witness they're gonna prove those elements. Defense, tell them what you're gonna be debating today. We don't care about the first element, right? Just focus on that, those are just clear-cut things. It's going to help you later on in the season once you've all done this for months. But as of where you are right now, I thought both of you did a really good job. So good job on that. Anything else?
Real quick, just one thing. You jogged my memory on it. As he said, slow down, but because you guys do not have the hand motions because we're on Zoom, I found it very, very difficult to find where you were trying to place the emphasis in your direct examinations. So be sure to slow down very, very slowly for those positions. Make them clear to me in some way, as Christopher was saying. So.
Yeah. And then I just texted back saying that we were good to go. So, all right. I guess first, any questions for us? No? Solid. Okay. What schools are you both from?
Wake
The
Forest.
plaintiff is from Miami of Ohio.
Okay,
And-
plaintiff, Miami, Ohio, defense.
The defense is from Wake Forest University.
Nice, awesome. Well, congratulations to both of you. I wish the best of you. Good season. And yeah, good job, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, everybody.